Just 3 weeks ago, there was a deadly collision in New York between a commuter rail train and an SUV. Well, there's news of another crash, this time on the West Coast. Rise News correspondent Shahan Ramkissoon has the report with the latest on this. Shahan?
Yeah, that's right, Debbie. More than 24 people were injured when a Metrolink train crashed into a stationary vehicle in Oxnard, California. Authorities say a truck or tractor was stationary on the tracks when it happened. The passenger train had been traveling 79 miles per hour when its engineers spotted a fiery truck in its path. Officials say emergency protocols were followed, and despite hitting the brakes, it was unable to stop in time. 4 train cars derailed, injuring 28 of the 51 passengers.
It high-centered, was it unable to get off?
I don't have the, it was actually stuck there. The driver of the vehicle is not under arrest. However, I can say that we are looking into this as far as any potential acts that may have taken place that would require a criminal investigation.
Meanwhile, the Transport Department started its probe into last week's oil tanker derailment and explosion in West Virginia.
Did you get a picture of that? Man, that's hot.
So far, all they can say is that the train was not speeding. It comes as a federal government study predicts that trains carrying crude oil and ethanol will derail an average of 10 times a year over the next 20 years. The costs, $4 billion in damage and hundreds of lives. The projection comes from unreported analysis by the government that reviewed the risks of moving fuel through major cities. Now, this is, of course, just a prediction by authorities, but they say it's pretty accurate given the current trend of accidents.
Okay, so let's start with the very basics. Why was this truck or tractor trailer, whatever it was, stationary on the tracks?
Yeah, well, initially, the fire marshal came out in the morning and said that they weren't sure why it was there and that the truck driver was on the run, and they arrested him and he was in custody. But police later came out and said that they believe the truck was actually stuck. They're not sure whether it malfunctioned, and they haven't spoken to the driver to actually find out why that happened, because he was taken to hospital first and then taken in for questioning and released. So not too clear just yet.
So still don't know. And why did he flee, too?
Exactly.
I mean,
Nobody
where was
knows
he trying
why.
to go?
Maybe he was just so scared and he walked away. You know, he wandered off, they said. He wasn't too far away from the scene.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the bigger picture. And the study really does paint such kind of a bleak scenario.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more. What's it based on?
Well, it's based on studies and basically train accidents over the past couple of years, since the 2006 or so, looking at train accidents across the U.S. and also looking at the number of trains carrying oil and crude oil in particular across the U.S., from Canada to the U.S. Particularly. They say, given the number of accidents they've seen so far and given the fact that no new regulations are actually in place, this is how they've come to a conclusion that they will see so many train accidents over the next 2 decades.
Yeah, and of course we just saw that one in West Virginia where that train derailed and it was a huge fire.
Exactly.
Burned up a whole house. So what's the Transportation Department saying about what it's going to do to correct this problem to prevent future accidents?
New regulations by springtime, that's what they say.
Really?
So, you know, it's taken so many years for this to happen over and over and over for them to realize that there has to be more stringent measures put in place. What they will look at is the braking systems of trains. Basically, it takes a quarter of a mile to half a mile for a train to stop. And they say that there needs to be better braking systems put in place. Then also look at the cars themselves, the train cars, whether or not they can be safer to carry oil in particular and also passengers. So those new regulations, of course, will come into place. It'll mean millions, if not billions in dollars for train companies to actually replace. But if it happens, they say it should bring the risk down much more.
Let me go back to this accident. I'm going to ask you some little picky details that you may or may not have been able to get answers for in your reporting. The train, I believe, was reported to have been going 79 miles an hour before impact. Was that within the speed limit in that area?
Yeah, it was. It was within the speed limit, and that's why they say he needed a quarter of a mile to actually to stop. So he did brake when he saw the vehicle from a distance, but because it was such a short distance, he wasn't able to stop. So.
And are they satisfied that the warnings, the lights, and the gates all functioned properly?
Yep.
That this had nothing to do with the operation of the train and the train track?
And the railway. No, according to the officials, Metrolink says that everything was functional. The alarms went off, the brakes went off at the right time, so there really was nothing else the engineer could do. He acted correctly, they say, and because it was too close, that's why the crash happened.
It was just a truck on the tracks.
Yeah.
All right, Shahan Ramkissoon, thank you so much.
Pleasure.